Lena moved through the restaurant with the quiet speed of someone who had learned how to stay unnoticed. She balanced plates, refilled glasses, and offered polite smiles without letting her exhaustion show. The place was already busy even though the evening rush had barely started. Soft music played from hidden speakers, the kind that blended into the air instead of standing out. The warm lights gave the room a golden glow, and every table seemed filled with people who spoke in low, important-sounding conversations. Lena didn't mind the work. She didn't love it either. It was simply what she had to do. She needed the job to support herself and help her younger brother with school. She didn't think about the future too much. She was too busy surviving the present. Still, there were moments when something inside her felt restless. Sometimes, when the restaurant brought in a pianist on the weekends, Lena would pause near the service counter just to listen. The sound of the piano always pulled her into some old part of her memory, a part she didn't open often, a part she didn't talk about. That night, though, Lena wasn't thinking about music at all. She was thinking about the table she was about to approach. A group of wealthy guests had taken the long table near the center of the room. Their clothes, their watches, even the way they sat made it clear they were used to being treated differently. She recognized one of them instantly, Mr. Dalton, a businessman who appeared in the news often. People said he was extremely successful, smart, and sometimes a little too proud of it. He sat with 6 other people, all laughing loudly, talking over each other, and waving their hands as if the whole place belonged to them. Lena knew this kind of group well. They expected perfect service, quick attention, and endless patience. She took a breath and approached them with her small notepad. "Good evening," she said, keeping her voice friendly and even. "May I take your order?" Mr. Dalton glanced at her without really looking. "Give us a minute," he said, waving his hand as if brushing dust away. Lena stepped back with a quiet nod. She was used to these little gestures that reminded her where she stood, but she didn't let them bother her. She had learned a long time ago that how people treated her said more about their world than hers. A few minutes later, the group finally waved her over again. This time they placed a complicated order, each person requesting changes, additions, or substitutions. Lena wrote everything carefully and repeated the order back to them as she turned to leave. One of the men at the table noticed the small enamel pin on her apron. It was shaped like a tiny golden treble clef. "Hey," he said, pointing at it, "you into music or something?" Lena froze for a second. That pin meant more to her than she ever explained. It was the only thing she carried from her childhood, something her mother gave her the day she played her first small recital. But Lena smiled politely. "I used to play piano a little," she said softly. "Not much anymore." "Piano?" The man repeated, grinning. "Really?" Mr. Dalton, who had been barely paying attention, lifted his head. "You play piano?" he asked, sounding amused. "Not professionally," Lena said, trying to keep the conversation short. "Just when I was younger." Dalton leaned back in his chair, a half-smile forming. "So why'd you stop?" Lena hesitated. She never liked telling strangers about her life. "Life got busy," she said simply. "I had responsibilities." One of Dalton's friends laughed under his breath. As if the idea of a waitress having responsibilities worth mentioning was somehow funny, Dalton tapped his fingers on the table, still wearing that curious smile. "You know," he said, "there's a piano right over there." He pointed toward the corner of the restaurant, where a glossy black grand piano sat with its lid closed. Lena followed his gaze but said nothing. "Tell you what," Dalton continued, sounding more entertained by the moment, "if you're really as good as you say, play something for us." Lena blinked. "What? Right now?" "Why not?" he said. "We could use some real music tonight," his friends chuckled. One of them added, "Yeah, give us a show." "How often do you get to hear a waitress play a grand piano?" The tone wasn't kind. It wasn't curious. It was the kind of tone people used when they expected someone to fail. Lena felt her stomach twist. She didn't want to embarrass herself. She didn't want to be the center of attention. And she certainly didn't want to be part of some joke they'd laugh about later. "I don't think I can." "Hey," she said quietly. "I'm working," Dalton shrugged. "Just one song. If you can play, great. If not, no harm done. That wasn't true. There would be harm. She could already imagine the whispers if she played badly. It's the awkward looks, the online posts, if someone recorded it. But then she noticed movement from the edge of the room. The manager was watching. He didn't say anything, but he gave her a small, encouraging nod. Not a command, just a reassurance that she wouldn't get in trouble. Lena swallowed hard. She looked back at the piano, then at the group of wealthy guests waiting for her to decline. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped them on her apron. "All right," she said softly. "One piece." A few of the guests raised their eyebrows. Surprised, she agreed. Lena walked toward the piano, feeling every step. The restaurant began quieting down as people noticed something unusual happening. Some watched with curiosity, others with amusement. She lifted the piano lid slowly, trying to steady her breathing. She hadn't touched a real piano in years. Only old memories knew how this would go. The bench felt cold when she sat. She rested her hands lightly on the keys, but didn't press them yet. Her fingers felt stiff, unfamiliar with their old place. Whispers floated through the restaurant. People wondered what she was doing. Some assumed it was part of the restaurant's new entertainment. Others already judged her before hearing a single note. Lena closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered sitting at a much older piano in her childhood home. She remembered practicing until her hands hurt. She remembered her mother clapping softly from the doorway. After every song, she opened her eyes again. She touched the first key. A soft sound filled the space. Then another. Then a third. She wasn't playing yet. She was testing, feeling, reconnecting. Dalton watched with his arms crossed, the same amused smile on his face. But something inside Lena unlocked with each note. A part of her she had buried under bills, long shifts, and responsibilities she didn't ask for. She took a slow breath, and then she began to play. The melody started gentle, but the notes were clear, pure. Each one grew stronger as her confidence returned piece by piece. People around the room stopped talking. Forks paused midair. A couple near the window turned to look. Her fingers moved more smoothly, as if remembering a language she hadn't spoken in years. Lena didn't look at anyone. She didn't think about the dare. She didn't think about Dalton or his friends. She only thought about the music. Her hands moved faster. The room grew quieter. Lena played, as if she were alone in the world. She didn't know it yet, but in a few seconds, the quiet room would transform into something she never expected. The people who doubted her would soon sit in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were hearing. And the simple dare meant to entertain a wealthy table would become the moment that changed her life. Lena did not hear the whispers growing behind her, but she felt the air change. It happened slowly at first, like a soft shift in the room's temperature. People stopped their conversations one by one. Chairs stopped moving. Even the clinking of silverware seemed to pause. She kept her eyes on the piano keys, trying to keep herself steady. She had promised herself she would only play for a minute or two, just enough to prove she wasn't afraid. But as her fingers moved over the keys, something inside her loosened, something she had kept locked away for years. It was strange, almost like breathing after holding her breath too long. The first few notes were simple, gentle and careful. But the longer she played, the more her hands remembered. Her touch grew lighter, then stronger, then smoother. She didn't think about the people watching. She didn't think about whether Dalton and his friends were amused or disappointed. She didn't think about anything except the way the music was growing, note by note inside her. Behind her, a couple near the window leaned forward. "Is she really playing that?" The man whispered. His partner nodded slowly. "She's good. Really good." A family sitting at another table stopped eating as the children turned around to watch, interested. One of the kids climbed halfway out of her chair just to see better. A few older guests exchanged surprised looks, their eyebrows lifting as the music filled the room. The piano had never sounded like that before. Usually the hired performers played background melodies, pleasant but forgettable. This was different. This was full of emotion. like someone telling a story without using words. Lena's coworkers peeked from the service station. One of the junior waiters whispered, "I didn't know she could do that." Another nodded, eyes wide. She never told anyone. At the big table in the center, Dalton's smirk faded. He straightened up in his chair, watching the waitress he had expected to embarrass herself. His friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. "She's actually good," one of them muttered. "More than good," another replied quietly. Dalton didn't say anything. He was staring so hard that he didn't even blink. For the first time in a long time, Lena let herself forget about her worries, the bills, the long shifts, the way life had taken her away from everything she once dreamed of. Her fingers moved faster and faster, flowing from soft notes to brighter ones. She wasn't thinking about which pieces she remembered. She wasn't planning anything. Her hands followed their own memory. She remembered the hours she spent practicing as a child, the afternoons when her mother would sit nearby, humming along as she played. She remembered the small recitals at community centers, the smell of old wooden chairs, and the feeling of pride she used to have after every performance. She remembered a time when music made her feel like she belonged somewhere. A quiet breath escaped her. Though she didn't notice it, behind her, the manager stood near the bar, his eyes fixed on Lena. He had known she was polite, hardworking, and reliable. He had no idea she carried something like this inside her. He watched her in awe, wondering how someone with talent like that had ended up wiping tables instead of performing on stage. The music grew richer. Lena's hands danced across the keys faster now, weaving through the melody with incredible accuracy. Her posture softened. Her shoulders relaxed. For those brief minutes, she wasn't a waitress. She wasn't someone struggling through late shifts. She wasn't someone who had pushed her dreams aside for those minutes. She was a pianist. People around the restaurant exchanged looks of disbelief. They were not expecting such a performance, especially not from someone who had brought their drinks only moments ago. The atmosphere felt almost magical, the kind of moment people would remember much later. A man sitting near the center quietly whispered to his wife, "You think she learned professionally?" "No idea," she whispered back. "But listen to her. She plays like someone who loves it." Lena noticed a slight trembling in her hands, not from fear but from emotion she had buried for years. She wondered if she still had the right to play. She wondered if she deserved this feeling again. But the piano answered her before she could decide. The sound carried her forward. Her fingers slowed for a moment, moving into a softer part of the piece. The notes became gentle again, almost like a faint whisper. The room leaned into the silence, waiting to hear every sound. Even Dalton stopped breathing normally. Something about the music reached him in a way he didn't expect. The dare he had made, the joke he thought would entertain his table, felt foolish now. Lena shifted into a new section of the melody, one she had not planned. She played from memory, but she also played from her heart. The music rose and fell like a quiet conversation. A few guests blinked rapidly, moved by the unexpected beauty of it. A child near the back whispered, "She looks like she belongs there." The truth was, she did. As she approached the end of the piece, Lena felt her heart beat slow. She let the final notes drift into the air. Her fingers paused on the keys for a brief moment, as if holding on to something precious before letting it go. Then the last sound faded. The silence that followed was thick, full of wonder. No one dared to speak right away. It was the kind of silence that came after witnessing something honest and rare. Lena stayed seated, breathing quietly, unsure of what would happen next. She didn't know if Dalton would mock her. She didn't know if people judged her. She didn't know if she had made a mistake. Then someone clapped. It was soft at first. Like a single raindrop, another clap followed. Then more, and then the entire restaurant burst into applause. The sound washed over her, warm and genuine. People who had barely looked at her earlier were now smiling, nodding, even cheering. A few guests stood up, giving her a small standing ovation. Lena's face warmed, her cheeks turning pink. She looked down shyly, unsure how to react. She was used to moving through the world quietly, unnoticed. She wasn't used to being seen, truly seen. Her coworkers applauded from the side, whispering things like, "I can't believe it," and "She's incredible." The manager clapped as well, his eyes shining with pride. At the main table, Dalton finally clapped too, but his expression was different from the others. He looked almost uncomfortable, as if he didn't know how to face what he had caused. His friends avoided meeting his eyes. Lena stood slowly from the bench and gave a small, polite bow. She felt her legs trembling, her breath slightly shaky. She had not expected this. She had not expected any of it. As she walked back toward her duties, people continued clapping. A few guests called out compliments. One older woman gently touched her arm and said, "Thank you for that. It was beautiful." Lena nodded with a quiet smile, still trying to process everything. She returned to the service area, where her coworkers greeted her like she had done something extraordinary. One of them whispered, "You should be on a stage." Lena laughed softly. "I was just trying not to mess up." But inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a small spark of hope, a small reminder that there was still a part of her that dreamed, and though she didn't know it yet, that spark was about to lead her into a new chapter of her life, one she never saw coming. The applause from the restaurant slowly faded, but its echo stayed in Lena's mind long after she returned to the service counter. Her heart was still beating fast, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in a long time. Something warm, something almost like belonging. She kept wiping a glass that was already spotless. Her hands needed something to do. She didn't trust them to stay still. A coworker bumped her shoulder lightly. "You okay?" he whispered. Lena nodded quickly, though she was still breathless. "I didn't expect that," she said. "None of us did," he replied with a smile. But the moment of quiet didn't last long. The restaurant began moving again, busy and full of life, though it felt different now. People looked at her with curiosity and respect instead of indifference. She could feel it every time someone caught her eye. She didn't know how to handle being the center of attention. She had spent years avoiding it. Lena took a steadying breath and went back to work. She had tables waiting for her, orders to deliver, plates to clear. The music might have stopped, but the shift hadn't, as she moved between tables. She tried not to focus on the stares or the quiet whispers she caught pieces of. "That girl plays like a professional. Where did she learn? Did you record it? I want to show someone." Some of the guests smiled warmly when she approached. A few complimented her gently, not wanting to overwhelm her. Others simply nodded, acknowledging her in a way they hadn't before. Her cheeks warmed each time, and she answered every kind word with a shy smile. But she still hadn't gone back to Dalton's table. She wasn't avoiding them, not exactly. She just needed a few more minutes before she faced the people who had put her in that position in the first place, eventually. Though, she had no choice. When she approached their table again, she kept her posture straight and tried to look calm. Dalton and his friends had changed completely. Their loud conversations had quieted. Their smug expressions had softened. Dalton himself looked unsure, as if he wasn't used to being surprised. He cleared his throat. "That was impressive," he said. It sounded like the words were new to him. Lena smiled politely. "Thank you." One of his friends, who had been laughing earlier, now seemed almost embarrassed. "We didn't expect you to play like that," he said. "Neither did I," Lena admitted softly. They laughed this time not at her, but with her. It felt different. As she walked away, she heard one of Dalton's friends whisper, "Man, you really didn't see that coming, did you?" She didn't hear Dalton's reply, but she could imagine it. The next hour passed quickly as more tables were filled with new customers. The buzz in the restaurant didn't settle. People kept mentioning the performance, and some even pointed discreetly toward the piano, as if expecting Lena to return to it. But she didn't. Not tonight. One surprise was enough. Still, every time she passed the piano, her eyes lingered on it. She wondered if this was a sign of something she had ignored. For too long, the piano keys had felt warm under her. Fingers. Familiar. Comforting. Like they had been waiting for her. She pushed the thought aside and focused on finishing her shift. Later in the evening, when the dinner rush was slowing, the manager called out to her. "Lena?" he said gently. "A moment?" Her stomach tightened. She worried she might have broken some rule without knowing it. But when she stepped into his office, his face wasn't stern. It was thoughtful. "I hope you're not worried about earlier," he began. "What you did was incredible. The guests loved it. The staff loved it. I think everyone was surprised." Lena lowered her eyes shyly. "I'm glad it was okay. I didn't want to cause trouble." "You didn't," he said quickly. "Actually, I've been thinking." She looked up. The manager paused, choosing his words. "We have the piano here every weekend, but the performers we bring in, well, they're good, but what you did tonight felt real. People connected with it. I could see that from the floor." Lena listened quietly. "I know your schedule is already full," he continued. "But if you ever want to play here on weekends, even just for an hour or two, I'd be happy to arrange it. You'd be paid for performing, of course." Lena blinked, stunned. A moment passed before she found her voice. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to decide now," he said kindly. "Just think about it." But she already knew she wanted to. The idea filled her with a mix of excitement and fear. It had been years since she allowed herself to imagine something like this. Could she really perform again? Was she ready to open that part of her life again? She thanked the manager quietly before leaving the office. On her way back to the dining area, she noticed Dalton standing near the entrance alone, waiting for the rest of his group to gather their things. She hesitated for a moment. Before walking past him, he turned slightly when he saw her. "Lena," he said. His voice was not loud or proud, just normal. Surprisingly normal. "Yes," she replied. "I owe you an apology." Lena blinked, unsure if she heard him right. Dalton cleared his throat. "I thought you were bluffing earlier. I didn't expect you to accept the dare. And even when you did, I thought it would be just a simple tune. I didn't think," he stopped, searching for the right words. "I didn't think you could play like that." Lena smiled softly. "It's okay." "No," he said quickly. "It's not. I made a joke at your expense. I was wrong." She didn't want to make him uncomfortable, so she kept her tone gentle. "People make mistakes. And if you hadn't dared me, I wouldn't have played today." He exhaled slowly. "Still, thank you. For the music." Lena nodded politely. "You're welcome." Dalton didn't say anything else. He simply watched her walk away, his expression thoughtful. When she returned to the counter, her coworker nudged her. "What did he want?" "Nothing," Lena said, but a small smile formed on her lips. Her coworker grinned. "He looked like someone who got his pride handed back to him." Lena laughed quietly. "Maybe just a little." The night eventually came to an end. The restaurant's lights dimmed as the last guests left. The staff cleaned up, stacking chairs and wiping down tables. When Lena finally stepped outside, the cool night air brushed against her skin. She breathed it in, letting the quietness settle into her. She replayed the night in her mind, the dare. The music, the applause, the offer from her manager. She still couldn't believe any of it. It felt unreal, like a dream she might wake from. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. It had happened. And because it happened, everything felt different now. As she walked toward the bus stop, she found herself glancing at her hands. The fingers that used to fly across piano keys years ago had remembered everything, and she realized something important. Maybe she wasn't done with them. Music. Maybe music wasn't done with her. She wasn't sure where this would lead. She wasn't sure if she would perform again. She wasn't sure if she would accept the manager's offer. But the spark she felt earlier, it was still there, and a spark is enough to begin something new. Lena smiled to herself as she waited for the bus, her mind drifting back to the piano. The keys had felt alive under her touch. The sound had wrapped around her like a long-lost friend. And deep down, she knew this night wasn't just special. It was the beginning of something she didn't yet understand, a beginning she couldn't ignore. The day after the unexpected piano performance, the restaurant felt different. It was like a soft wave of excitement had washed over everything. The workers moved with a bit more energy, The guests seemed more curious than usual, and even the air felt lighter. But she, the quiet waitress who had surprised everyone, felt something entirely different inside her. She felt restless. She felt seen. And she didn't know if that was good or bad. She woke up earlier than usual. Unable to sleep, her mind replaying the night before. She could still feel her fingers moving across the piano keys, even though she wasn't touching anything. She could still hear the gasps, the silence, the way the room seemed to freeze as she played. She hadn't planned any of it. She just reacted. And now, everything felt like it was changing. When she reached the restaurant that morning, she noticed the way her coworkers looked at her. Not with judgment or annoyance like they sometimes did, but with something closer to respect mixed with surprise. One of the line cooks gave her a small nod, something he had never done before. Another worker smiled at her without hiding it. It was strange. Nice, but strange. She tied her apron and tried to slip back into her routine. Table numbers, drink refills, orders to deliver. But every time she walked past the piano in the corner, she felt a soft tug in her chest. Like a quiet reminder of something she had forgotten about herself. Later in the afternoon, when the lunch rush started to ease, the manager called her aside. His tone wasn't sharp like usual. Instead, he looked almost awkward as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "You played well last night," he finally said, scratching his neck. "Didn't know you had that in you?" She nodded politely, unsure how to respond. "Just so you know, people have been calling since morning," he continued. "They're asking about you. Some want to know if you're performing again. Some want to book tables just to hear you play." She blinked, confused. "I'm not a performer. I just played once." "Yeah, well, that once made a splash," the manager said with a small chuckle. "Anyway, if you ever want to play a few minutes before closing or something, it might bring in customers." She immediately shook her head. "No, sir." He lifted his hands in surrender. All right. Just saying. Let me know if you change your mind." As she walked away, she felt the familiar weight of uncertainty settle back into her chest. She didn't want attention. She didn't want pressure. But she also couldn't deny the feeling she had when she played, the feeling that for a moment, the whole world made sense. But the one person she kept thinking about was the man who dared her to play, the millionaire. His face, his reaction, the way he went from smug to stunned, it all kept replaying in her mind. She didn't even know his name. And she didn't know why he stayed in her thoughts. By evening, the restaurant started filling up again. People whispered more than usual, their eyes scanning the room as if expecting something magical to happen again. She tried her best to focus on her work, and then she saw him. The millionaire walked in, calm and confident. Dressed simply, but still looking like he didn't belong in the small restaurant. His presence alone drew attention. People turned. Some nudged each other, her heart skipped. He wasn't with a loud group this time. He wasn't showing off. He came alone. Their eyes met for a second. He gave her a polite nod, not the smug grin he had worn the night before. Something in his expression was different, gentler. She approached his table slowly, trying to steady her breath. "Good evening," she said softly. "Would you like to order something?" "Yes," he replied. "But before that, I wanted to thank you." She frowned slightly. "For what?" "For playing last night," he said. "I know I dared you. I know it started off as a joke, but the moment you began, I realized it wasn't something to laugh about. It was something to admire." She looked down, not used to such direct appreciation. "I'm not a musician," she murmured. "That's funny," he said with a soft smile. "Because you played like one." She didn't know how to respond. She just nodded and took his order. Her hands shook slightly when she wrote it down. As the night went on, she tried to keep her focus. Each table needed something. Each customer had a question. But her mind wandered. She kept feeling the millionaire's eyes on her, not in a strange or uncomfortable way, but in a thoughtful one. Near closing time, the restaurant grew quiet. Only a few tables remained. She wiped down a counter when she noticed him walking toward the piano. He stood there for a moment, studying it, as if trying to understand something. Then he turned to her. "Do you play often?" he asked. No, she replied, staying by the counter. Not anymore. Why not? He asked. She hesitated. Life got busy. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than she said. If I asked you to play again, he said quietly, not as a dare, not as a challenge, but as a request. Would you? Her heart tightened. She looked around the nearly empty restaurant. The moment felt strangely intimate despite the space between them. No, she whispered. Not today. He accepted her answer with a gentle expression. Maybe someday. She didn't respond. When he left, she watched him walk out the door. She told herself it didn't matter. He was just a customer, wealthy one, maybe, but still just another person passing through. But deep inside, something felt like it was shifting again, after cleaning up. She decided to sit by the piano for a moment before heading home. She didn't play, she just touched the keys lightly with her fingertips. Each key felt warm, familiar, full of memories. The restaurant was empty. The lights were dim. Everything was still. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where music wasn't something she had left behind, but something she still carried proudly. Then she sighed, stood up, and walked away. But something told her that her connection to the piano, and to the man who dared her to play, wasn't finished yet. Not even close. The next morning began quietly, but her thoughts were anything but quiet. She woke up with a feeling she couldn't explain, something between hope and worry. The previous night kept replaying in her mind. The millionaire returning to the restaurant. His quiet voice. His gentle expression. His interest in her music, and the way he seemed to look at her like she mattered. She pushed all those thoughts away as she got ready for work. She didn't want to expect anything. Thinking too much only led to disappointment, and she already carried enough of those. So she tied her hair back, put on her simple clothes, and walked to the restaurant like any other day. Still, even as she walked, she kept glancing at the sky, as if expecting life to suddenly give her a sign. But nothing happened. Just the usual morning sounds, the usual passers-by, the usual routine. When she finally reached the restaurant, she let out a soft breath and stepped inside. The morning shift felt normal at first. Tables filled and emptied. Coffee cups clinked. Customers asked for extra napkins, sauce, or the bill. She moved with her usual grace, doing her best to keep things smooth. Her coworkers had started treating her differently, but today they didn't mention the piano, and for that, she was grateful. But the quiet inside her didn't last long. Around noon, the manager approached her again, his voice awkward in that same way from the day before. Someone called asking for you, he said. Her chest tightened. For me? Why? They didn't say. They just asked if you were working today. I told them yes. She frowned. Who was it? Didn't give a name. She didn't want to assume anything, but a small part of her wondered if it was the millionaire. She shook the thought away. It could be anyone. A curious customer. Someone who heard about the piano moment. Maybe even someone who came the night she played and just wanted to see her again. Still, it made her nervous. The hour passed slowly after that, each minute stretching longer than the last. She tried to keep her hands steady as she took orders, but her mind kept drifting. She caught herself staring at the restaurant door more than once, and then, in the middle of the afternoon, the door opened, and there he was, the millionaire. But this time he wasn't alone. A woman and an older man walked beside him. They looked elegant, confident, and a little curious. They followed him as he walked inside, scanning the environment with the kind of eyes used to judging places. Her heart thudded louder. She stood still for a moment, unsure what to do. He noticed her immediately. He greeted her with a warm smile, one that wasn't boastful or proud, just genuine. She walked toward them slowly, trying not to show her nerves. Good afternoon, she said quietly. Would you all like a table? Yes, the millionaire said. Somewhere calm, if possible. She guided them to a corner table away from the noise. When they sat, she handed them menus. But before she could walk away, the woman asked gently, Are you the one who played the piano the other night? Her cheeks warmed. Yes, just once. The woman smiled with a spark of interest. We heard about it. The older man nodded slowly as if studying her. He told us you have a rare gift. The waitress felt her breath catch. She didn't know he had spoken about her to others. She didn't know he thought much of it at all. She swallowed softly and lowered her eyes. It was nothing special, she murmured. The millionaire leaned forward slightly. It was. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded and stepped away to give them space. But her heart was beating so fast she could barely keep her steps steady as she took their orders and moved. Around the restaurant, she kept catching them watching her. Not in a strange way, but in a way that made her feel seen, not as just a waitress, but as a person. When she returned with their drinks, the older man spoke again. Do you still play? He asked. Not often, she answered honestly. I used to. A long time ago. But life changed. He nodded thoughtfully. Life changes for all of us. But music, it waits. Sometimes it waits longer than we expect. She didn't fully understand what he meant. But his tone was kind after serving their food. She stepped back and allowed them to enjoy their meal, but her curiosity grew. Who were these people? Why did they care so much about her performance? And why did the millionaire bring them? Her questions were answered sooner than she expected. Near the end of their meal, the woman waved her over again. Can we ask you something? She said softly. The waitress nodded. The millionaire looked up at her with steady eyes. Would you be willing to play again? Not tonight if you're uncomfortable. Not here if you don't want to. But sometime? For us. Her breath caught. She stared at him, unsure what to say. She wasn't used to being asked things like this. She wasn't used to being wanted for something she could do. I don't know, she whispered. The woman leaned forward kindly. We're not trying to pressure you. It's just, talent like yours shouldn't stay hidden. The older man nodded in agreement. You have something rare. Something worth nurturing. The waitress lowered her gaze. She felt overwhelmed, flattered, honored, but also scared. She wasn't ready for attention. She wasn't ready for expectations. She wasn't even sure she was ready to believe in herself again. I appreciate it, she said finally, her voice small but sincere. I really do, but I don't know if I can. The millionaire smiled gently. You don't have to decide now. Just think about it. She nodded slowly. When they finished their meal and prepared to leave, the millionaire approached her one last time. I didn't come today to convince you, he said quietly. I came because I wanted you to know something. She looked up, waiting. You changed the room that night, he said. You made people feel something. That's not a small thing. Her chest tightened. And whether you ever play again or not, he said softly, I'm glad I got to hear you. She didn't expect the warmth that rushed through her. She simply nodded, her voice stuck in her throat as he walked out. She watched him again just like the night before. And once again, she felt something shift inside her. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was a quiet, growing hope. A hope she didn't quite understand yet, but one she couldn't ignore anymore. When the door closed behind him, she turned to look at the piano. It sat in the corner, untouched, waiting, and for the first time in years. She didn't feel afraid of it. She felt drawn to it. Something told her that her connection to music and to the man who saw her. Talent was only beginning, the morning of the final. Turning point felt strangely calm. She woke up before the alarm again, but this time, it wasn't worry that woke her. It was something soft, something steady, something unfamiliar but comforting. Maybe hope. Maybe curiosity. Maybe both. Whatever it was, it wrapped around her quietly as she got ready for the day. She moved slowly, taking her time, not rushing like she usually did. When she looked in the mirror, she noticed something different in her own eyes. She looked less tired, less empty. There was a small spark. There was a spark she hadn't seen in years. She brushed her hair, tied it back, and stood still for a long moment. The memories of her life, all the struggles, all the quiet hurt she had carried for so long, floated through her mind. But they didn't feel as heavy anymore. Something had shifted. After a deep breath, she grabbed her bag and left for work. The walk felt shorter than usual. The air was cool, and for the first time in a while, she really noticed the world around her. The sound of footsteps on the sidewalk, the soft breeze moving through the trees, the warm smell of fresh bread from a bakery down the street. She let herself feel everything. It made her smile slightly. When she reached the restaurant, she stepped inside with a calmness she didn't expect. The staff greeted her differently now, warmer, friendlier. Even the manager gave her a nod, like he finally saw her as more than just another worker. But she didn't let it go to her head. She just appreciated the change quietly. All day she kept thinking about the piano in the corner. Even when she wasn't looking at it, she could still feel its presence. Like a quiet invitation she hadn't answered yet. But she also thought about him. The millionaire, he had shown her a kind of respect she wasn't used to. He had listened. He had seen something in her. She barely remembered herself. And though she didn't fully understand his intentions, she felt something inside her shift because of him. For the first time in a long time. She wondered what her life might look like if she made a different choice. If she allowed herself to dream again by late afternoon. The restaurant grew busier. People came in with weekend energy, laughing, talking, looking happier than usual. She served table after table, keeping her movements calm and smooth. And then, just when she turned from the counter, she saw him walk in, not with a group. Not with anyone else, just him. He walked in quietly, as if he didn't want to disturb anything. But the moment their eyes met, she felt her heart flutter unexpectedly. He approached her with a gentle smile. "Hi," he said. She nodded softly. "Hi, busy day?" He asked a little. She replied, "Do you have a moment?" She hesitated but nodded. The dinner rush hadn't started yet, so she led him to a quieter area near the back where they could talk without being interrupted. He sat. She stood for a moment, unsure if she should sit too. But he noticed her hesitation. "You can sit," he said kindly. She slowly sat across from him. He took a quiet breath before speaking. "I didn't want to bother you, but there's something I wanted to tell you. Something important." Her hands tightened around the edge of her apron. "I didn't come here today to ask you to play," he said gently. "Not to convince you, not to pressure you. I came because I wanted to share something I didn't get a chance to say before." She nodded slightly, listening. He leaned forward a little, his eyes soft and sincere. "When you played that night, you reminded me of something I forgot. Something I lost a long time ago." She frowned gently. "What do you mean?" "Joy," he said. "The kind that doesn't come from money or success. The kind that comes from feeling something real. Something human. You made a whole room feel that." She looked down, her cheeks warming. She didn't know what to say. "I know life hasn't been easy for you," he continued softly. "I don't know your full story, but I can see it. The way you carry yourself. The way you look at the world. People who have lived through hard things, they move differently." She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "But even with all that, the end.